You won't need to find me a wife anymore, Mr. Moretti, because after today, you won't have a secretary. Danielle Carter's voice was so calm that Vincent Moretti almost missed the meaning of the white envelope sliding across his mahogany desk. Almost. The envelope stopped beside his untouched espresso, perfectly aligned with the edge of a folder containing photographs of 3 women from some of the wealthiest families in New York. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan glittered beneath a cold December morning. But inside Vincent's 43rd floor office, the silence suddenly felt heavier than steel. He looked down. 2 words were printed beneath Danielle's name. Letter of resignation. For 7 years, Vincent had watched powerful men lose their composure across this desk. Danielle never had. At 31, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that made shouting unnecessary, her dark brown skin illuminated by the pale winter light, her charcoal gray suit immaculate, her expression controlled behind elegant glasses. She had organized his impossible schedule, remembered meetings he forgot, corrected mistakes before anyone discovered them, and somehow learned when to bring him coffee and when to leave him alone. She had never once arrived unprepared. Until this morning, Vincent had believed she would never leave. "What is this?" he asked. Danielle's eyes remained steady. "My resignation. I can read." His voice lowered. "I'm asking why it's on my desk." 24 hours earlier, he had called her into this same office and delivered what he considered another assignment. "Find me a wife." He had said it without embarrassment, as casually as if he were asking her to book a flight to Chicago. The Moretti family's legitimate businesses were expanding, old alliances were shifting, and Vincent's advisors had decided that a 38-year-old unmarried man at the center of an empire invited too many questions about succession. Vincent had no interest in romance. He wanted stability, intelligence, discretion, and someone capable of surviving the scrutiny attached to his name. Danielle knew him better than anyone, so naturally, he had given the problem to her. She had stood across from him holding her tablet, silent for 3 long seconds. Then she had asked, "What kind of woman are you looking for?" Vincent had leaned back in his leather chair. "Someone loyal, intelligent, independent, someone who doesn't care about my money, someone who can walk into a room full of powerful people without becoming intimidated." Danielle's fingers had tightened around the tablet. He hadn't noticed. "Anything else?" "She should tell me the truth when everyone else is afraid to." Danielle had looked directly at him then, and something unreadable passed through her eyes. "That may be difficult to find." Vincent had almost smiled. "That's why I'm giving the job to you." Now, less than a day later, she was resigning. Vincent rose slowly from behind the desk. He was accustomed to departures being negotiations over salary, status, or opportunity. Danielle's envelope contained no demand, no counteroffer, no accusation. Somehow, that disturbed him more. "Is another company paying you more?" "No." "Did someone approach you?" "No." "Then I'll double your salary." For the first time, emotion cracked through her composure, not gratitude, but disappointment. "You still think this is something money can fix?" Vincent went completely still. Danielle removed her office keycard and placed it gently beside the resignation letter. 7 years reduced to a small rectangle of plastic and 1 white envelope. "I'll finish transferring everything by Friday," she said. Then she turned toward the door. Vincent watched her walk away, unable to understand why the woman he trusted to find him the perfect wife had suddenly decided she could no longer remain in his life. 7 years earlier, Danielle Carter had entered Moretti Holdings carrying a second-hand leather portfolio, a resume with no famous names on it, and exactly $43 in her checking account. She had been 24 then, fresh from 3 years of administrative work at a struggling real estate firm in Queens. Dressed in a navy suit, she had altered herself because professional tailoring cost money she didn't have. The receptionist had looked at her resume twice before directing her upstairs. Vincent Moretti had been 31, already feared in boardrooms for the same reason storms were feared at sea. He rarely announced when he was coming, and everything changed when he arrived. Their first interview lasted 11 minutes. He asked about scheduling, confidentiality, crisis management, and whether she became nervous around important people. Danielle had answered every question without trying to impress him. Then Vincent deliberately placed 3 conflicting appointments in front of her and asked which one he should cancel. She studied the pages for 20 seconds. None of them. Vincent lifted his eyes. Danielle moved the first meeting 40 minutes earlier, converted the second into a secure conference call, and noticed the third address was only 6 blocks from his afternoon appointment. "You can make all 3, she said. "You just need someone organizing your day instead of protecting your ego." The room had gone silent. His chief of staff looked horrified. Vincent stared at her for several seconds before saying, "When can you start?" That Monday became 7 years. Danielle learned his world by details no one else considered important. Vincent hated unnecessary conversation before 8 a.m. He drank espresso without sugar but switched to black tea when he hadn't slept. He never remembered birthdays, yet became quietly irritated when important people forgot his. He trusted numbers more than promises and silence more than compliments. Within 6 months, Danielle could recognize trouble by the way he loosened his tie. Within a year, she could tell whether a meeting had gone badly by how carefully he closed his office door. She never asked questions he could not answer, and Vincent gradually stopped pretending she was merely managing his calendar. When an investor arrived 2 hours early hoping to catch Vincent unprepared, Danielle rearranged an entire afternoon before the elevator doors opened. When a charity dinner accidentally seated 2 longtime business rivals at the same table, she corrected the arrangement before either man noticed. When Vincent's mother, Eleanor, underwent emergency surgery in Boston, Danielle cleared 4 days of meetings, booked the earliest flight, and placed the boarding pass in his hand before he had even thought to ask. "How did you know?" he had whispered. "Because you're her son before you're anyone's boss," Danielle replied. He remembered that sentence. He simply never told her. Years passed, and Danielle became part of the architecture of his life, as constant as the walnut walls of his office or the city lights beyond the glass. Employees came and went. Executives changed. Assistants lasted months. Danielle remained. People began calling her Vincent's shadow, but they misunderstood the relationship. Shadows followed. Danielle anticipated. She was often 3 decisions ahead of him, quietly preventing problems for which Vincent later received the credit. He never intended to diminish her. That was precisely the problem. He had grown so accustomed to her competence that gratitude had become assumption. By year 7, he no longer said, "Can you handle this?" He simply placed things on her desk because Danielle always handled them. And Danielle, with her steady voice and unreadable eyes, always did. Until the morning Vincent handed her the one assignment that transformed 7 years of loyalty into something she could no longer pretend did not hurt. The assignment had not come from romance. It had come from a problem Vincent believed could be solved with the same ruthless efficiency he applied to everything else. 3 weeks before Danielle placed that resignation letter on his desk, Eleanor Moretti had summoned her son to Sunday dinner at the family townhouse on East 74th Street, where polished silver, white linen, and generations of expectation waited beneath a crystal chandelier. Danielle had attended because Vincent insisted she bring documents requiring his signature afterward. She remained near the library while Eleanor spoke to him in the dining room. But the old townhouse carried voices farther than people realized. "You're 38, Vincent," Eleanor said. "You've built businesses, foundations, properties. But you have built nothing that survives you as a family." Vincent answered with characteristic calm. "I didn't realize marriage was on the quarterly agenda." Eleanor did not laugh. She reminded him that every public decision he made now attracted scrutiny, that investors wanted stability, that relatives wanted certainty, and that the Moretti name had become larger than one man. Vincent listened because he respected his mother, but emotion had never been his preferred language. By Monday morning, he had converted her concern into a task. Danielle was reviewing his calendar when he placed a cream-colored folder on her desk. "I need you to identify suitable candidates." She looked up slowly. "For what?" "Marriage." For the first time in years, Danielle genuinely thought he was joking. His expression told her otherwise. "You want me to find you a wife? You know my schedule, my family, my responsibilities, and which people can be trusted. Who else would I ask?" The words were intended as praise. Somehow, they landed like an insult. Danielle lowered her eyes to the folder before he could see what moved across her face. Inside were profiles prepared by a private family advisor, attorneys, executives, philanthropists, women from established families in New York, Boston, and Washington. Every page reduced a human being to education, reputation, connections, and compatibility. This isn't hiring a chief financial officer, Danielle said quietly. I'm aware. Are you? Vincent leaned against her desk. I'm not looking for a fairy tale. I need someone who understands responsibility. Danielle closed the folder. And what happens if she wants to be loved? That question stopped him. Only for a second, but she noticed. I would respect her. That wasn't what I asked. The office seemed suddenly too quiet. Vincent studied her, perhaps realizing that she had crossed from professional advice into something personal. Yet Danielle's expression had already returned to neutral. What qualities? She asked. He began listing them. Loyalty, intelligence, independence, courage, discretion, someone unimpressed by wealth, someone capable of challenging him when he was wrong. With every word, Danielle felt something inside her becoming painfully clear. 7 years of knowing how he thought, what frightened him, what softened his voice when he called his mother, what silence meant he needed company even when he refused to ask for it. 7 years of becoming indispensable while carefully refusing to name what he had become to her. She wrote every requirement down. Vincent never noticed that her handwriting grew smaller toward the bottom of the page. How soon? She asked. Start this week. Danielle nodded. Of course. Then she spent the next 14 days doing exactly what Vincent had asked. She researched backgrounds, arranged introductions, protected his privacy, and selected 3 women who seemed almost impossibly suited to him. But each profile taught her the same unbearable lesson. She could help Vincent choose almost anything in his life. A flight, a contract, a house, a future. She simply could not sit 3 feet away and professionally help him choose the woman who would share it. By the second week, Danielle had narrowed 27 names down to 3, and Vincent disliked all of them for reasons he could barely explain. The first was Caroline Whitmore, 34, a corporate attorney from Boston with an Ivy League education, impeccable manners, and enough family connections to satisfy even Eleanor Moretti. Danielle arranged dinner at a quiet Manhattan restaurant where privacy cost almost as much as the food. Caroline was intelligent, composed, and perfectly capable of discussing business without appearing impressed by Vincent's name. On paper, she was nearly flawless. Yet halfway through dinner, Vincent found himself watching the entrance whenever it opened. Danielle was not there. She had arranged everything, confirmed the reservation, checked the private dining room, and left before Caroline arrived. Vincent should have appreciated the discretion. Instead, something felt wrong. Caroline asked what he did when he was overwhelmed. Vincent answered automatically, I drink tea. She smiled. Tea. He paused. He had never chosen tea himself. Danielle simply placed it on his desk on the days when his eyes were tired and his patience was thin. The realization irritated him for reasons he could not name. Caroline received a courteous message the next morning thanking her for dinner. The second candidate was Rebecca Sloan, 36, director of a charitable foundation in Connecticut. She was warm, independent, and completely uninterested in Vincent's money. Danielle considered her the strongest match. Vincent met Rebecca at an afternoon gallery event in Soho. They spoke for almost an hour. Rebecca made him laugh once, something rare enough that Danielle noticed from 20 feet away while handling a scheduling issue near the entrance. Vincent noticed Danielle noticing. His smile disappeared. Later, in the car, Danielle asked, what was wrong with her? Vincent looked through the tinted window at the traffic crawling up 6th Avenue. Nothing. Then why did you decline a second meeting? I didn't feel anything. Danielle stared at him. You told me feelings weren't part of the criteria? Vincent turned toward her. Apparently they are now. She looked away before he could read her expression. The third woman was Lauren Pierce, 32, a technology executive from Manhattan. Brilliant, direct, confident. She challenged Vincent within 10 minutes of meeting him, and instead of becoming offended, he seemed entertained. Danielle should have been relieved. She had completed the assignment. But as she watched them across a private reception room at a charity fundraiser, something heavy settled behind her ribs. Lauren was exactly what Vincent had requested. Maybe that was why Danielle finally understood she had made a mistake by agreeing to any of this. Near the end of the evening, Vincent approached her while Lauren spoke with another guest. Well, he asked. Danielle kept her attention on her tablet. She checks every box. That isn't what I asked. Danielle finally met his eyes. What are you asking me? Vincent hesitated. He had negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars without searching for words. Yet suddenly, he seemed unable to find the right ones. Do you think she understands me? Danielle's expression softened for half a second. She met you 45 minutes ago. You understood me after 11. The words landed between them with uncomfortable precision. Danielle lowered the tablet. That was my job. Vincent's jaw tightened. You say that like the last 7 years meant nothing beyond a paycheck. No, she said softly. That's exactly the problem. Before he could respond, Lauren returned, smiling as she slipped naturally into the space beside him. Her gaze moved toward Danielle. Vincent, could your secretary bring us 2 glasses of champagne? Danielle went still. Vincent did too. 7 years of loyalty, judgment, sacrifice, and invisible work suddenly compressed into 2 careless words. Your secretary. Danielle lifted her chin, her eyes steady. Of course. And Vincent, who could read an entire room in seconds, failed to understand that her quiet answer was the beginning of goodbye. Danielle returned with the champagne herself, though 3 servers were standing less than 15 feet away. She carried the 2 crystal flutes across the reception room with the same measured grace she brought to everything Vincent had ever asked of her. Around them, Manhattan's elite drifted beneath amber chandeliers, exchanging polished smiles beneath the soft music of a string quartet. Lauren accepted her glass without looking up. Thank you. Danielle placed Vincent's beside him. Mr. Moretti. Something about the formality caught his attention. She usually called him Vincent when they were away from the office and no clients were listening. Tonight, the distance in those 2 words felt deliberate. Danielle. His voice stopped her. She turned. Lauren glanced between them. Actually, before you go, could you check whether my car can be brought around at 10? And Vincent mentioned another event next Thursday. Just put it on his calendar for us. Danielle's fingers tightened around her tablet. I can check his availability. Lauren smiled as though correcting a junior employee. I'm sure you can move something. That's what assistants do. Vincent heard it. Danielle knew he heard it. For one suspended moment, she waited. Not for anger. Not for some dramatic defense. Just one sentence. Something as simple as, Danielle manages my office. Speak to her with respect. Vincent's eyes shifted toward Lauren, but an older investor approached at exactly that moment and touched his elbow, asking for an introduction. Vincent hesitated. That hesitation lasted perhaps 3 seconds. For Danielle, it lasted 7 years. Excuse me, she said quietly. She walked away before either of them answered. Inside the service corridor, the music softened behind thick double doors. Danielle stopped beneath the cool fluorescent light and stared at the tablet in her hands. Her reflection appeared faintly in its black screen. Composed face, perfect hair, professional suit, professional smile gone. She remembered every time she had defended Vincent when people called him impossible. Every birthday dinner she had missed because his flight changed. Every Sunday morning spent reorganizing a week because he had decided at midnight to fly somewhere on Monday. None of those sacrifices made him owe her love. Danielle understood that. Love was not wages earned through loyalty, but dignity was different. She had spent 7 years becoming essential to a man who still allowed someone to reduce her to a person who fetched drinks. By the time Vincent found her near the coat check 20 minutes later, her expression was calm again. You disappeared. I was working. Lauren didn't mean anything by that. Danielle looked at him. I didn't say she did. Then why are you upset? The question almost made her laugh. Instead, she handed him his revised schedule. Your car arrives at 10. Thursday is clear now. Vincent studied her face. What did you move? My plans. What plans? It doesn't matter. Danielle. There was that familiar authority in his voice, the tone that usually made rooms rearrange themselves around him. Tonight, it only made her tired. You asked me to find someone who would tell you the truth when everyone else was afraid to, she said. So here's the truth. You don't notice what people give up for you because you've gotten used to everyone making room for your life. Vincent's expression hardened, not with anger, but surprise. Is this about Lauren? No, Danielle held his gaze. This is about me. The word silenced him. She reached into her purse, pulled out a small notebook, and wrote herself one reminder for the morning. Update resume. Then she closed it, slipped it away, and returned to the reception. Vincent remained beside the coat check, watching her disappear into the crowd, unaware that by sunrise Danielle would type the most difficult letter she had ever written. Friday morning arrived with an absence Vincent noticed before he understood it. At 7:15, there was no espresso waiting beside his laptop. At 7:20, Nobody entered to remind him that his 8 o'clock meeting had been moved to the conference room because construction noise had started 3 floors below. At 7:32, Vincent opened his calendar and discovered 3 color-coded notes Danielle had prepared before leaving Thursday evening, each one so precise that she seemed present even when her chair outside his office sat empty. She had taken the day to complete the final transfer of her responsibilities from home. That was what human resources told him. Professional, efficient, clean. Exactly like Danielle. Vincent hated it. By 9, a temporary assistant named Jason had brought him coffee with sugar. Vincent stared at the cup. "I take it black." Jason apologized and hurried away. 5 minutes later, Vincent realized he had been unfair. Jason had known him for less than an hour. Danielle had known him for 7 years. That distinction should have explained the irritation. It didn't. By noon, Vincent had answered 6 questions Danielle normally prevented from reaching him. A conference call started 12 minutes late because nobody had noticed that 2 executives were joining from California. His mother called asking whether he had remembered the foundation luncheon next Wednesday. He hadn't. Danielle always remembered. "Where's Danielle?" Eleanor asked. Vincent looked through the glass wall toward the empty desk. "Leaving." Silence filled the phone. "Leaving for lunch." "Leaving me." Eleanor was quiet again, but this silence felt different. "What did you do?" Vincent's jaw tightened. "Why does everyone assume I did something?" "Because Danielle has tolerated you for 7 years." "Mother." "Vincent." He closed his eyes. "I asked her to find me a wife." Eleanor said nothing for nearly 5 seconds. Then she sighed so deeply he could hear disappointment traveling across 60 blocks of Manhattan. "You asked Danielle?" "She knows me better than anyone." "Exactly." Vincent straightened. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means you can understand companies worth millions of dollars and still be astonishingly foolish about people." She ended the call before he could respond. That afternoon, Vincent walked to Danielle's desk and stood there alone. Most of her belongings were gone. The framed photograph of her mother and younger brother had disappeared. So had the small ceramic mug that read "Make It Make Sense," the one she used whenever his schedule became unreasonable. Only labeled folders remained, arranged for whoever replaced her. Vincent opened the top drawer. Empty. The second contained office supplies. In the third, he found a slim black binder marked transition notes. Inside were passwords, contact preferences, travel procedures, birthdays, dietary restrictions, reminders about which investors hated morning meetings and which charities Vincent supported anonymously. 7 years of knowing his world had been translated into instructions for a stranger. Then a loose sheet slipped onto the floor. Vincent bent down and picked it up. It was the original list he had dictated when describing the woman he supposedly wanted to marry. Loyal, intelligent, independent, unimpressed by money, calm under pressure, honest enough to challenge me. Beside the final line, Danielle had made a tiny handwritten note, probably without thinking. Difficult to find. Vincent stared at those words until the office around him seemed to disappear. He remembered Danielle standing beside his mother's hospital bed. Danielle correcting him when everyone else nodded. Danielle refusing expensive gifts at Christmas because she said her salary was enough. Danielle walking into rooms filled with men twice her age and never lowering her eyes. One requirement after another stopped looking hypothetical. They started looking familiar. Vincent slowly sat in Danielle's empty chair. For 7 years, he had believed she understood him better than anyone. Only now did he confront the possibility that he had never truly looked closely enough to understand her. Vincent remained at Danielle's empty desk long after the office lights automatically dimmed for the evening. Manhattan burned beyond the windows in thousands of white and amber squares, but his attention stayed fixed on 6 lines written on a sheet of paper he had treated like a specification sheet. Loyal, intelligent, independent, unimpressed by money, calm under pressure, honest enough to challenge me. He read them again, slower this time, and memories began returning with uncomfortable clarity. Loyalty was Danielle boarding a 6:10 a.m. flight to Boston when Eleanor became ill, not because Vincent ordered her to come, but because she knew he would forget to eat, sleep, or answer his family's calls. Intelligence was Danielle finding a 6-figure accounting error during a quarterly review while 3 senior executives argued over presentation colors. Independence was the afternoon Vincent offered to send a company car to pick her up during a snowstorm, and she replied that she had survived the New York subway for 28 years and could survive another Tuesday. Unimpressed by money was every Christmas bonus she accepted with a simple thank you, while refusing the extravagant gifts other executives used to win his favor. Calm under pressure was Danielle entering his office during the worst weeks of his career, placing a cup of tea beside him, and saying, "We solve one problem at a time." And honesty was everywhere. She had told him when he was arrogant, when he was impatient, when he was wrong. Everyone else studied Vincent's mood before speaking. Danielle studied the problem. He lowered the page. "Difficult to find," he murmured. Suddenly, the words seemed almost cruel. His phone vibrated. A message from Lauren appeared on the screen asking about dinner Saturday. Vincent stared at it without answering. He tried to picture another evening with her. Lauren was accomplished, intelligent, elegant. None of this was her fault. But the image felt strangely empty because every imagined future now contained an absence he could finally see. No Danielle outside his office at 7 in the morning. No dry comment when he scheduled 3 meetings without lunch. No quiet knock before difficult news. No voice saying his name in that particular way when she wanted him to stop talking and listen. Vincent stood abruptly and returned to his office. He opened the personnel system, something he had never personally done before, and found Danielle's departure paperwork. Her forwarding information was private, but one line stopped him cold. New employer, Carter Strategic Operations, Washington, D.C., start date, January 6th. She wasn't moving to another company. She was building her own. Vincent leaned back, stunned by another truth he should have noticed years ago. Danielle had never lacked ambition. She had simply spent hers building his life instead of her own. His office door opened softly. Eleanor stepped inside, still wearing the camel coat she had worn to dinner. "Your receptionist said you were here." Vincent handed her the list. His mother read it once, then looked at him. "You finally noticed." He hated how gently she said it. Did everyone know except me? Know what? That Danielle. The sentence failed him. Eleanor folded the page carefully. "I knew how she looked at you when you weren't looking at her." Vincent turned toward the windows. "And how did I look at her?" Eleanor's expression softened. "That is the question you should have asked before you gave her away." The words settled heavily. Vincent checked the time. 8:47 p.m. Danielle's final day ended Monday. He had one weekend to decide whether what he felt was merely fear of losing the person who made his life function, or something far more dangerous to a man who had spent years believing he needed no one. For once, Vincent Moretti had no strategy. Only an empty desk, a resignation letter, and the growing realization that the woman he had been searching for had been standing 6 feet outside his door all along. Monday arrived beneath a gray Manhattan sky, and Danielle Carter came to work at 7:05 a.m. for the last time. She wore the same navy coat she had owned for 3 winters, carried one cardboard box, and entered the 43rd floor without ceremony. By 8, the photographs were gone from her desk. By 9, her remaining files had been transferred. At 11, she trained Jason on Vincent's travel preferences without once looking toward the glass doors of his office. Vincent noticed every minute of it. He had spent the weekend rehearsing arguments and rejecting each one. More money would insult her. A promotion would arrive 7 years too late. Asking her to stay because he needed her would only confirm the very reason she was leaving. So he did something unfamiliar. He waited. At 4:42 p.m., Danielle closed her laptop, slipped it into her bag, and stood beside the desk that had contained nearly a quarter of her life. Several employees hugged her. Others wished her luck in Washington. She smiled, thanked them, and walked toward the elevators carrying her box against her chest. Vincent watched through the glass until the elevator doors began to open. Then something inside him refused to remain still. "Danielle." His voice crossed the marble lobby. Conversation stopped. She turned slowly. Vincent walked toward her without his jacket, without his usual controlled expression, without caring who was watching. "Can we talk?" Danielle glanced at the elevator. "I think we've had 7 years to talk." The doors opened. She stepped inside. Vincent followed, but he stayed several feet away, leaving the space between them untouched. The doors closed, sealing them inside polished steel and silence. Danielle pressed the lobby button. "Why are you leaving?" he asked. "You know why. I know what happened with Lauren. This isn't about Lauren." "Then tell me what it is." Danielle looked at the descending numbers above the door. 40, 39, 38. You asked me to find someone who understands your life, she said. I did my job. I found women who met every requirement you gave me, and I rejected them. That doesn't change anything. It changes something for me. Danielle finally faced him. Vincent, I spent 7 years making sure your life worked. I chose that. I'm not blaming you for it. But somewhere along the way, I stopped building my own. 32. 31. Why didn't you tell me? Tell you what. Her composure trembled for the first time. That watching you interview women to stand beside you hurt more than I expected? Vincent said nothing. Danielle swallowed and continued. You don't owe me feelings because I worked hard for you. You don't owe me a future because I stayed. But I owe myself enough dignity to leave before I become bitter about a choice you never asked me to make. 24. 23. Vincent's carefully prepared words vanished. Was there ever a chance? He asked. Danielle's eyes lifted to his. For what? For me to see you before it was too late. Her expression softened, but sadness remained. I don't know. Danielle. No. Her voice was gentle, not angry. You don't get to discover something on Friday and turn it into another decision by Monday. I'm not one of your deals. I know. Do you? I'm beginning to. The elevator reached the lobby with a quiet chime. The doors opened onto polished marble and afternoon light. Danielle stepped out. Vincent did not stop her. He did not touch her arm, block her path, or issue an order. He simply stood inside the elevator while she turned back once. Goodbye, Vincent. The doors started closing. For 7 years, he had believed power meant controlling what happened next. But as Danielle disappeared from view, he finally understood that respecting her meant allowing the next choice to belong entirely to her. 3 months later, Vincent Moretti stood outside a modest office on K Street in Washington, D.C., holding nothing but a white envelope. There were no assistants beside him, no driver waiting at the curb, no carefully arranged meeting on Danielle's calendar. He had taken the train from New York that morning and walked the final 4 blocks through a light spring rain because this was not business, and for once, he wanted nothing about the moment to resemble an order. Gold lettering on the glass door read Carter Strategic Operations. Vincent stared at Danielle's name longer than necessary. She had done it. Inside, Danielle stood near a conference table speaking with 2 clients, wearing a cream blazer and the same focused expression he remembered from their first interview. But something was different. This room belonged to her. The decisions were hers. The people around her waited for her judgment. Vincent felt an unexpected pride that carried no claim of ownership. When Danielle finally noticed him through the glass, her sentence stopped. Surprise crossed her face before professional calm returned. 10 minutes later, she stepped into the hallway. You're 3 months late, she said. Vincent almost smiled. I thought showing up immediately would prove you right. About what? That I turn feelings into decisions before I understand them. Danielle folded her arms. And now you understand them? Vincent looked through the glass at the company she had built without him. More than I did. He handed her the envelope. Danielle stared at it, but did not take it. Please tell me that isn't another employment contract. It isn't. A partnership offer? No, a check. Danielle. That finally brought the smallest smile to her face. She accepted the envelope and opened it. Inside was the handwritten list from his office. Loyal, intelligent, independent, unimpressed by money, calm under pressure, honest enough to challenge me. Beneath the final line, Vincent had added one sentence. None of these qualities matter if I only value them when I'm afraid of losing the person who has them. Danielle read it twice. When she looked up, her eyes were shining, but her voice remained steady. Why bring this to me? Because I spent 7 years appreciating what you did for me without properly appreciating you. He paused. And because I don't want you back as my secretary. Danielle's expression changed. Vincent continued before fear could turn his words into another command. I'm not asking you to leave this company. I'm not asking you to return to New York. I'm not asking you to rearrange your life around mine. The hallway became very quiet. Then what are you asking? Vincent drew a slow breath. Dinner. Danielle blinked. Dinner. One dinner. No business. No schedule. No expectations. You choose the restaurant. You choose the day. And if the answer is no, I get back on the train and respect it. For perhaps the first time since they had met, Danielle saw Vincent Moretti standing before her with absolutely no leverage. No position he could offer. No salary he could increase. No instruction she was required to follow. Just a man asking a woman for something she was entirely free to refuse. Danielle looked down at the old list, then back through the glass at the company carrying her name. Friday, she said. Vincent's breath caught. Friday, 7:30. There's a little place near DuPont Circle. A smile slowly reached his face. I'll be there. Don't be early. I'm always early. Then learn patience. Vincent laughed softly. Danielle opened her office door, then stopped. And Vincent? He looked at her. This doesn't mean I'm coming back. His answer came without hesitation. I know. She nodded and stepped inside. Vincent walked toward the elevator alone, strangely lighter than when he had arrived. He had spent years believing respect meant protecting people, providing for them, solving their problems. Danielle had taught him something harder. Sometimes respect meant surrendering control and honoring another person's freedom to choose. 3 months later, there would be another dinner, then another, and eventually a life neither of them had needed to sacrifice themselves to build. But that afternoon, nothing was promised except Friday at 7:30. And for Vincent, that was enough, because he had finally learned that love without dignity was merely possession, and dignity begins where choice is allowed to remain free.